some builds in this game aren't just good, they are broken. As in, the game wasn't designed to let you do this kind of broken. So today, I've put together the top 10 builds that I believe hit the hardest right now in version 1.0. Whether you're running solo or coordinating with a squad, at least one build on this list is going to completely change the way you play. Let's get into it. I'm starting off the 10th spot with a build that, honestly, holds a special charm for me. The Magic Missile Split and Lightning is that go-to option when you want to learn the game the right way, without relying on weird tricks or obscure mechanics. It is Orion's kit in its most classic form, and that isn't a criticism, it's a compliment. The concept here is simple. You take Orion's starting spell and invest heavily into splits for the magic missile. Each split upgrade breaks your missile into more projectiles, and you quickly notice the screen getting increasingly packed with objects flying in every direction. Sounds crazy? Because it is. But it's a controlled chaos, and that makes all the difference in your first few hours of gameplay. The moment this build truly wakes up is when you add the lightning infusion. Suddenly, every single one of those missiles already filling the screen becomes an electrified projectile. Your damage per second starts climbing in a way you didn't expect, and hordes that used to look intimidating literally turn into electric dust. It is incredibly satisfying to watch this happen in real time. It sits at number 10, not because it's weak, but because the other 9 builds I'm going to show you do even more absurd things. Think of this one as the perfect entry point into the world of broken builds in the Spell Brigade. If you've never tried it, start here. You will understand the game at a completely different pace. In the 9th spot, we have a build that goes against everything most people look for in the Survivors game. While everyone else wants to be the one clearing the screen solo, the Acid and Ice support asks you to take a step back and think about the team. And look, when you find a group that understands what you are doing, this build is one of the most satisfying experiences the Spell Brigade has to offer. The focus here isn't direct damage, but rather control and amplification. You invest in movement speed to stay alive and well-positioned, and an XP pickup radius to ensure your progression during the run doesn't fall behind. These are 2 investments that seem subtle, but make a massive difference in the game's pacing, especially in longer matches where positioning begins to matter much more. The heart of this build is the Ice plus Acid combo, and when it works well, it's almost unfair to watch. Ice freezes entire groups, giving your team room to breathe at critical moments, and the Acid you apply immediately after increases the damage all your allies deal to those enemies. You don't need to kill anything, you just need to set up the perfect scenario for your teammates to destroy everything. It stays in 9th place because it relies heavily on communication and team composition to reach its maximum potential. Playing solo, it loses a lot of its strength, which is why it doesn't rank higher. But if you have an organized squad, do not underestimate this build for a second. Sometimes the most valuable player in the match is exactly the one you don't even realize is saving you. You know that moment when the screen fills with enemies and you feel that tightness in your chest? With the Arcane Rift and Frost Nova control, that moment simply doesn't exist. This build was made exactly for that, to give you an answer before the problem even appears. And that is why it deserves the 8th spot on this list. From the very start of the run, you will want to look for 2 specific stats: cooldown reduction and area size. Cooldown reduction keeps your abilities ready whenever things get tight, and area size expands the radius of Arcane Rift and Frost Nova to a point where massive groups of enemies are caught completely within your control zone. Combined with investments in Arcane and Frost damage, these 2 attributes completely transform how you position yourself on the map. Now, what really makes this build work is the sequence. Frost Nova stops everything, freezing the entire wave in an instant, and Arcane Rift follows up immediately, scaling damage progressively on enemies that cannot move. In advanced waves and extreme threat levels, this window of vulnerability you create is the difference between clearing the stage or being swallowed by the chaos. The only reason it isn't higher on the ranking is simple. It requires you to think. You need to know the pacing of the waves, anticipate the groups, and use each ability at the right moment. It is not a build for those who want to turn on autopilot, but if you enjoy the feeling of always being in control, regardless of what the game throws at your face, the Archmage with this combination will give you exactly that. There are builds that clear the screen, and then there are builds that simply make the chaos work for you. Full Dark Corruption fits right into this second category, and that is why it earns the 7th spot in the ranking. It's one of those combinations that almost feels wrong because of how dirty it is, but that's exactly why I find it so fun. The focus here is entirely on the dark element, so everything revolves around turning the horde itself into part of the enemy's problem. Instead of just stacking direct damage, you start spreading corruption and making the battlefield increasingly unstable. This creates a great sense of indirect control because you aren't just reacting to what comes your way, you are changing the behavior of the entire fight. What I like most about this build is that it truly shines when the team is coordinated. In co-op, it becomes practically a show of organized confusion because the hordes start fighting among themselves and the pressure on the mages drops significantly. It's a build that doesn't just rely on high numbers. It relies on being in the right place with the right team, making the chaos work to your advantage. It stays at 7th place because it is extremely strong, but also a bit more situational than the builds above it. If the team doesn't keep up, part of its value is lost. But when it clicks, my friend, it feels like you've turned off half the game. And to me, that already puts this build in a special category. This build has a charm that I can't help but admire. Solitary Focus, also called Monomagic, is that choice that feels like a risk at the beginning. But when it scales, it transforms a single spell into a weapon of mass destruction. It is the perfect setup for the type of player who likes to do just one thing, but do it in a way that the game practically gives up on trying to stop you. The idea is simple and brutal. You take the pack that forces you to use only one spell and dump everything into it. All the gold, every card that appears, every upgrade priority goes directly into making that single spell reach its maximum level. When you choose the right spell, like Falling Stars or Astral Orbs, the result is an absurd amount of power that fills the screen and makes the run feel like a tutorial for a different, much easier game. What I find most satisfying about this build is the clean sense of progression it gives you. You feel every level, every upgrade, every card that pushes your spell into an increasingly insane state. There are no distractions, no doubts, just you and that spell growing in a way that makes you realize what it means to have absolute power during a run. It sits in 6th place because it is strong, but it isn't universal. In specific objectives and less demanding maps, it shines brightly and clears everything at a speed you wouldn't expect. But when the run demands more flexibility, when the chaos escalates and the pressure rises, it loses a bit of its luster. In the 5th spot, we have a build that completely shifts the game's perspective. You don't try to avoid danger, you step right into it and come out alive in a way that seems impossible. The dodge crit heal is the perfect archetype for anyone who wants to play aggressively and still feel like they have a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th life hidden in their pocket. The focus here is to build everything on 3 pillars: dodge chance through relics, critical damage, and health regeneration. What makes this combination work so satisfyingly is that every critical hit not only deals high damage, but also heals you. It's as if you are gaining life while the game tries to kill you, providing an unfair sense of safety during the toughest moments. What I like most about this build is it frees you up to play right in the middle of the chaos. In boss bullet hells, when the screen fills with projectiles and it feels like there is no room to breathe, you can dive straight in, attack aggressively, and still walk away alive. Because every time you land a crit, you are healing yourself. It is a feeling of immortality that only shows up in builds that truly grasp the game. It stays in 5th place because it is incredible for survival, but it isn't necessarily the fastest at clearing waves or dealing the most absurd damage. Its focus is keeping you alive, and when you live long enough, the natural result is that you destroy everything anyway. If you are the type who likes to play aggressively without fearing death, this build is exactly what you need to feel like you are dominating the game, not being dominated by it. In the 4th spot, we have a build that's practically the game's answer to anyone complaining that the tankier bosses are too annoying. The Acid Multi-Hit Shred is that combination you use when you want to turn an enemy with 10,000 health into a pile of dust so fast you can barely believe it's the same game. The focus here is double and very direct. You invest heavily in multi-projectiles to increase the number of hits the enemy receives, and you run the acid element to tear through boss armor. Combining the two makes the actual damage you deal skyrocket to a point where numbers don't even seem to make sense. It's the kind of build that proves shredding defense is just as important, sometimes even more so than simply stacking raw damage. What I find most satisfying about this build is that it acts as an aggressive support. You aren't just dealing damage, you are stripping away the enemy's ability to protect themselves. And when you remove the armor from a tanky boss, their health bar simply disappears. It melts in record time, and seeing that happen is one of the most beautiful sights the Spell Brigade has to offer. It sits at number 4 because it is extremely strong, but more specific than the builds below it. If your focus is clearing bosses, melting high HP targets, or just watching damage numbers climb unfairly, this is the build you want. It isn't the one that fills the screen the most, nor the one that gives you the most immortality, but it is probably the one that will make you feel like you are dominating the game with the highest efficiency. We've reached the 3rd spot with a build that, to me, is one of the smartest in the Spell Brigade. The Scepter Mesh Plasma isn't just about high damage, it's about control, positioning, and the feeling that you are setting a trap the game cannot escape. And that is why it deserves this high spot. The secret starts with the combination. Lightning with fire creates the plasma infusion, and when you apply that to the scepter, the result is a network of projectiles that connect with one another. Each scepter within this grid becomes a point of constant damage, and when you spread them across the map, the entire area becomes a zone where enemies simply have no room to exist. The beauty of this build is that it works on 2 fronts simultaneously. On one hand, you have territory control, creating plasma barriers that force enemies to move exactly how you want. On the other hand, each of these damage points is working to melt elites and bosses at a pace that feels unfair. It is aggressive without being chaotic, and controlled without being passive. It takes 3rd place because it is one of the most well-rounded builds in existence. It doesn't rely on a single mechanic, doesn't require a specific team, and doesn't need perfect conditions to work. It simply does its job. It dominates space, deals brutal damage, and gives you the feeling that you are outplaying the game. If you want a build that puts you in control without stripping away the fun, the Scepter Mesh Plasma is the right choice. In the 2nd spot, we have a build that is pure consistency. And I confess, I absolutely love that kind of setup. The Solar Pulse Aura on the Sun Mage is that choice you make when you want to play it safe, without having to worry if you're going to die in the next minute. It is perfect for solo runs and long routes because it keeps you alive while you collect orbs and advance without rushing. The focus here is on 3 things: spell size, duration, and elemental damage auras, especially plasma and wildfire. When you invest in all of this, the result is a massive dome of damage that forms around you, protecting you as you move. It's like having a shield that also deals damage, and that completely shifts the gameplay dynamic. What I like most about this build is that it gives you freedom. You don't need to get cornered, you don't need to run around desperately, because the damage dome is already doing the heavy lifting. Enemies trying to get close are automatically deleted, and you can focus on grabbing orbs and maintaining the pace of the run without needing perfect movement. It takes second place because it is practically impossible to mess up with it. It isn't the build that deals the most absurd damage, nor the one that fills the screen the most, but it's the one you knew was going to work from the very first minute. If you want a safe, consistent build that lets you play at your own pace without pressure, the Solar Pulse Aura is exactly what you need. We have arrived at the #1 spot with the build that is, without a doubt, the most powerful in the community's current meta. The Falling Stars, Lightning on the Star Mage is exactly what you look for when you want the highest damage ceiling the game allows. It is that build that makes you look at the damage dealt and wonder if the number was typoed. The focus here is everything that makes critical damage and hit frequency work together. You prioritize luck to increase crit chance, cooldown reduction to keep your abilities always available, critical damage to multiply every hit, and the lightning element to transform those falling stars into an electric storm. It is a combination that requires you to assemble the upgrades in the correct order, but once you do, the result is absolutely absurd. What I love most about this build is the sheer sense of power. The falling stars, which are already strong on their own, transform into a continuous rain of electricity covering the entire screen. Bosses that are supposed to be a challenge are deleted in seconds, and you're just standing there watching the damage climb at a pace that feels more like a benchmark test than an actual match. It's the feeling that the game is moving at your pace, not the other way around. It takes the top spot because it simply deals the most damage. It isn't the safest, it isn't the most consistent, but it is the one that, when it works, grants you the ultimate power the Spell Brigade has to offer. If you want to feel like you are dealing the highest possible damage, want to see bosses disappear in seconds, and want numbers exploding across the screen, this is the build you want. The Falling Stars Lightning sits at the top of the meta, and there is no debate about it.